So I wasn't expecting the ant infestation.
Hey friends, it's Kinsey here at the Flocking Farm, and today we are back with our final installment in our series of Project Garden 2023. Let's get into it.
Hey, I'm Kinsey. I'm a crazy homesteader with a lot of ambitions. I like to talk a lot, and I'm a little goofy, but I'm passionate about intentional living, and I love my family. This is our story at the Flocking Farm.
Today we are going to be covering multiple days in this final installment of creating the garden in 2023. I believe it goes through day 10 or 11. We start at day 6, walk through finishing the rest of our soil, redesigning the garden, labeling things, making trellises, and most importantly, sowing seeds. In addition to that, you're going to get an update on some of the issues that we've been struggling with the house and how we're going to tackle those. If you hear some background noise, I apologize. They're working on the house today. We're working on getting some of it Tyveked. I'm sure I'm going to do an update on where we are in the house project here soon. But if you're hearing some background building noise, that would be what it is. Without further ado, let's get into our final installment for creating Project Garden 2023.
Found a guinea egg.
I decided that I wanted to put the T-posts in prior to planting anything so I wasn't disturbing the soil with my delicate little baby plants. And that's what we're doing here. If you recall, my initial design was to have it trellised on both of the long sides. I revised this because I realized that meant I would have to lean in 4 feet on either end in order to harvest anything, and that didn't seem very practical. So what I opted for instead was to do the trellis on the inner long side and then also cap the ends. That way I'm still able to harvest on this outer long edge and I'm only reaching in 3 feet. I have a lot of design ideas for next year, but this is something that I wanted to just get going for this year. Then I just went crazy and took these tomatoes and planted them in the ground. The lady who had gifted me these tomato start gave me like 30 of them. So I opted to plant a bunch of tomatoes on the outer edges of this one box, and then I called a friend to come and pick up the rest of the tomato starts. Afterwards, I then took my label maker because I had so many different varieties. I wanted to keep track of what the varieties were so that for next year I was able to prioritize what I really want in my garden and do a little bit more planning instead of just winging it. So I grabbed my label maker, and for all of the different varieties of tomatoes, I went ahead and printed it out, put it on these little dollar store stakes that I found, put tape over those to hopefully help protect them from the weather, and then stapled them onto the boxes underneath the square foot allocated for each one of the tomatoes. It was then time to go start making the trellises for the butt ends of this garden box. We had this welded wire that was sitting out here that originally we were planning to use for livestock fence, but had since then learned that woven wire tends to work better with livestock since welded wire breaks, whereas woven wire does not. I ended up having to call it because I had terrible wire cutters, but have no fear. I do come back and end up finishing this cut with another pair of terrible wire cutters that I believe completely bruised up my hands. My hands were pretty beat up after this, even with wearing the gloves. It was a tough thing to do, but I do eventually go out for cutting the rest of this wire and get a nice pair of wire cutters that is now a go-to item in my toolbox.
Alright, so it appears that I need better wire cutters because those were not doing the job, and I'm all about working smarter, not harder. So Otto will call too to see where the shovel's at because he was using it to backfill the house and I can't seem to find it, and I need that to move my soil around. So
I then decided to move a whole bunch of this soil that I had mixed in the large box into a smaller box. And you might be asking, Kinsey, didn't you just say that you like to work smarter, not harder? What could be your possible justification for this added expensive energy? Well, my friends, mostly because I just wanted an excuse to get my rhubarb in the ground. It was one of the only other starts that I had, and I knew I wanted it in this 4x4 foot box. But on the plus side, moving the soil over because I've been making my own type of mouse mix certainly helped me get it all much more evenly distributed throughout and mixed a lot better. Was all of the effort needed? Probably not. There was probably a good bit of wasted effort here, but at the end of the day, it looked pretty. It allowed me to be able to get more stuff in the ground, and it thoroughly mixed my soil, which, hey, I'll take it as a win, even though probably not the best use of energy. What can I say? Now, an area where I did not waste a bunch of effort was deciding to design my garden plot on my iPad in Procreate, because this allowed me to redesign and erase and rewrite over and over in different layers so that I could keep my boxes, but then I could really just mess around with where I wanted everything. And this became important because I decided to redesign my trellis system. This was the current garden plan. I would love to say that this was the final copy. I'm probably talking to you in the original clip here about why it's the perfect layout. I'm 100% guarantee you I changed it again.
I'm gonna go ahead and work on getting the labels together.
Gosh, I just love my label maker. I feel like this is a must-have for every single home. Now, I also have a Cricut that I do make labels with, but that is a lot more labor intensive, and I usually only do labels and things like that with my Cricut when they're larger or when it's going to be something that's far more visual. I really like the simplistic label maker because I don't have to choose a font, I don't really have to choose a size, it's just type and print and press, and I use this for all of my temporary labels, and if it's a system that ends up working, that's usually when I go back in and make nicer labels with my Cricut in my home. But this absolute must have for any house. Day 7 starts off with us visiting the label maker once again. This will not be the last time we use this handy dandy tool, but we do move outside. Otto was able to move up our native compost, so it was a little bit more readily accessible for me to utilize in the garden today. We'll be starting with, however, moving a little bit of this soil that's left over in this box over to the other 4x8 foot box to top it off, since it was just a little bit shallow for my liking.
It's kind of a fun view of the house. Look at that. Okay.
Because I do the majority of filming on my phone, I had primarily been working in silence, but I decided I really wanted to spend this time that I am outdoors listening to a Bible podcast. So that's what I was doing today. I have been really enjoying the Bema Discipleship podcast. They're on Apple Podcasts and CastBox. I'm a little bummed out that they're not on Spotify because that's what I use primarily, but the podcast is so good I like to go out of my way to listen to it. In that episode, they were talking about Abraham. I've been going through the beginning of their podcast and listening to the Genesis series. The Bema podcast, along with some of the Jordan Peterson podcasts on the Bible, are probably the two that I listen to the most as it relates to biblical teaching. I have been really ruminating on a lot recently. What made God choose Abraham? Like, what qualities did he find in Abraham that he wanted to create an everlasting covenant with him? And one of the things the Bema podcast pointed out was that Abraham was someone of radical hospitality. That's one of his key attributes, and that really resonated with me. I'm someone that loves to host. We try to do Bible study every week, and it's a place in which I feel so at peace and fulfilled in opening my home up, and I'm so blessed to have the opportunity to do that now that we are actually in a house. Before, when we were living in the trailer, we still had lots of people over, but darn if it wasn't a little bit crowded. And now that we have a home, as imperfect as it might be, it is one of my most favorite things to open that up and allow people to come in and fellowship with us, whether that be in Bible study or in a movie night. Just a place to be able to have our community gathered It is such a blessing to me to be in a position where that is something that is feasible for us now. And in addition to that, having running water so that I can do my dishes, oh my gosh, what a game changer for hosting to be able to wash my dishes afterwards. It's those little things in life, right, that we oftentimes forget or take for granted. And since I went for so long without running water, it is amazing to me how much that makes such a difference in my ability to have the bandwidth to host people in my home. All of that circling back around to Avraham and that idea of radical hospitality, that is something that I want to be able to emulate and bring into, quite literally bring into my home, is this idea of radical hospitality. So if you're looking for a Bible podcast, the Bema podcast is definitely one I would recommend. I will link that in the Jordan Peterson podcast that I have been listening to on biblical teaching here in the video description as well. One thing that I really look for in a good podcast about the Bible is somebody who understands the people in whom it was written to. It's my belief that the fundamentals of good exegesis is understanding the text in the context of who it was written to and when. And that is something that I often get from the Bema and from the Jordan Peterson podcast, is a little bit more of a deeper dive into the culture, who it was written to, the mindset, how they thought about things, because a Hebraic mindset is extremely different from a Western mindset, and it is something that continues to fascinate me in studying the biblical scripture.
So I did already water everything today. Here's that 8-foot bed all full. So I need to get my T-posts in, and then I can get my gridding done. But I want the T-posts in first. I think I'm also going to change what I'm doing here with the labels. I think I'm just going to put them on the edge here. Boom, 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 so I can look at all of them. Right now, we're going to work on filling up this box. I cleaned it out.
Although we work a little bit in the garden today, primarily we end up working in the house because of the amount of weather that we had gotten with the roof not being on and having had all those leaking issues. We did have issues with water getting trapped between the insulation and the ceiling. So you will see us in a little bit working with our lovely friends who lended a hand to help get a lot of that insulation out so we can let the wood breathe and then treat the mold.
Can you tell that I've been working in a garden? Nothing like a little dirt contour, you know what I'm saying? Well, in today's saga, we're ripping out all the insulation because indeed there is mold. Yeet. So let's take a quick detour and show you what I got done in the garden here. Isn't that nice? All of them are gridded. Got my T-posts and grid in here. We're getting really close. It's looking good. Gendered languages confuse me.
Well, this is easy because like the male is like, they usually say O at the end, and then the female is like A at the end.
What if I'm talking to a woman? If I say perfecto, should I say perfecta to her?
I think you would say perfecto and then she would say perfecta.
I think that's fair.
I think.
Well, this was disgusting. I was not expecting to find a whole bunch of carpenter ants in our floor, so it's a good thing that we were pulling this insulation out. I had noticed there were wood chips like on my couch on and off, and I would vacuum them up and they would be back, and I had no idea what was going on. Well, mystery solved. We did get these taken care of, thank the Lord.
So I wasn't expecting the ant infestation, but thank God for friends and help. Many hands make for light work. So I am going to work on getting a table set up out here to do Bible study outside in the beautiful, crisp evening air. Beep, 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 beep.
Day 9, We start with revamping our label system. I liked this much better for numerous reasons. I wasn't going to lose my labels and could see at a glance what we had. Highly recommend. This was much better than my original system. Circling back around to yesterday, us randomly talking about languages, Otto is trying to learn Spanish. He's actually on, like, I don't know, day 300 something in Duolingo, I think. And I am trying to learn Hebrew. For years, I actually studied Chinese, and I think the big reason was because someone once told me I couldn't learn it, and then I was like, well, watch me. But I realized I wanted to spend my efforts more on Hebrew because it's more applicable to the type of study that I do. I would much rather have a better understanding of the Hebraic language than spend time learning Mandarin. So that is one of my passion projects. Is I would love to become fluent in Hebrew. My mother also studies Hebrew. She's been studying it for a decade. So being able to converse in Hebrew, I would love for Elisheva to be bilingual, at least to be able to set that foundation where she could become bilingual. It's hard because I don't speak two languages, but it is an aspiration of mine. I know it's so much easier to learn and absorb languages while you're young too, so my hope is to expose her to enough Hebrew where even if she is not fluent by the time she's a little bit older, she is well on her way. Ways that I'm incorporating this, even though I'm not fluent yet, is I do have some Hebrew prayers, like the Modeh Ani prayer that I say every morning, which is, it's a traditional Jewish prayer that is thanking God for returning our souls within us after we wake. Saying Shalom, Boker Tov, which is good morning, and just incorporating extra little phrases into our everyday vernacular as I build upon my knowledge and understanding of Hebrew.
So I'm gonna say, this is my first time ordering from Johnny's Select Seed because I heard a YouTuber talk about them. Hello. And I'm sure the seeds are great, but what is with this packaging? Look how boring that is. There are no pictures of plants on this packaging.
Obviously, I'm being a little hyperbolic. It doesn't really matter that much. I just really like looking at the pictures. Plus, on a practical side, it's easy for me at a glance to see what I have instead of having to read it. But something that I did like about the Johnny seeds is they had a lot of instructions and information about the seeds on the back, as well as their germination rate and the amount of time that they take to harvest. So overall, I think that they're cool seeds, but I missed the really pretty graphics. And then Huckleberry knocked you over, so he wanted to say hello.
So it appears that some seeds spilled out of a variety of herb bags. I'm not about to sort through all of those seeds. I'm gonna go throw these in the yard, like just near where we have fresh mint, and maybe they will propagate. We'll just kind of throw some around.
Day 11 was just some final details. I put a couple seeds in the ground that came in the mail. But other than the cattle panel trellises, for all intents and purposes, the garden is done.
You know, gardening to me felt very intimidating because, like, where do you start? What's the best way to do it? There's so much research that you can throw into it. But I decided just to shift my mindset and say, done is better than perfect. And I'm not going to learn my gardening mistakes unless I actually garden. Now I can learn from the mistakes of others, but there's only so much of that you can do before you need to just start putting everything that you learned into practice and course correcting along the way. And I'm really, really, really excited to be at that point where I could say, guys, I stinking did it. Oh my gosh, you guys! What is this? Is that my spinach? Dude! How stinking exciting is that? Check it out. My brother just helped. My brother and my husband, who's manning the grill, because we're having a belated birthday party.
Birthday.
Hey, thanks. I can't tell. I have a hard time talking about my birthday. Otto just brought the cattle panels home, and him and Kyler worked on getting these up for me.
That one is a sucker. It's getting almost as big as me.
Wow.
Ethan teaching us about pruning tomato plants. Who knew? We're picking off all the suckers. Not me, on the plant.
I didn't start with these yield clips to show you what grew until a little bit later, but I got quite a nice little bounty from my garden this year. I've been trying to grow sunflowers for like 3 years and finally got some. Zucchini, basil. One of the big things that isn't pictured here that we ate a lot earlier in the season that I had a ton of was mustard spinach. I am a huge fan. It tasted like sugar snap peas. It was delicious. Thank you so much for joining me here today. You could have been anywhere and you chose to spend some time with me. I really appreciate it. Would it be too much to ask for you to leave a comment down below? Let me know, what is the biggest thing in this garden you would change? I have some ideas, and in an upcoming video we're going to be talking about some of the tweaks that I want to do for Project Garden 2024. But in those comment section down below, let me know what's the biggest thing you would change in this garden. So proud of the fact that we actually did plant something this year. As always, until we meet again, don't be afraid to live out loud, and we will catch you on that flippity flop.